Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. This is Joey, the Italian stallion Murray, joined by Russ, the idea guy Morgan. And Russ, we are officially unveiling the secret behind our podcast today.
You can't tell a secret, Joe. If you tell a secret, it's no longer a secret.
Well, that's what we're going to do. And in fact, we're not going to tell the secret. We've invited JJ Peterson into the studio, co-host of Building a Story Brand podcast, and the guy who is helping to implement the things in the book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
So we're no longer going to seem like such geniuses as if we came up with this concept on our own to teach people through story. It's really going to come out that, yes, we've been following a process.
That's right.
It comes from this podcast that we both are huge fans of. I would encourage you to jump on, listen to their podcast, not instead of ours, but after you've listened to ours, right? But their podcast is really awesome in the fact it does teach us as business owners how to communicate our message in a way that people love to learn, which is through story.
Who doesn't want that, right? What business owner right now is not wondering, how can I I've got gold here in my business. I know that I can help people if I could just get the message out.
Well, we all as parents know the best way to sell something to our kid is through story. Like, have you ever tried to feed your kid like green beans when they were little? Who did not make that into an airplane?
Exactly. Now, Brussels sprouts, I still can't figure out a good way to sell that. In fact, I never bought it from my parents. So,
well, at my house, Brussels sprouts are easy to sell because it comes with bacon.
Yeah, that's the difference maker, isn't it?
It is the difference makers. And you've got to tell things with stories. So today we're going to be digging into what does a story arc look like, and why is it that we love and can repeat movies constantly, and what keeps us engaged through that process that we can actually translate into sharing what we do to the world through story.
Now, here's a spoiler alert, okay? If you're listening to this and thinking, Joey, Russ, this whole idea of story, it's kind of like this kind of hot topic. I've heard it all, whatever. You haven't heard a couple things that we're going to cover today. In fact, guess what? You are not the hero. That's the number one thing you and I walked from that book, which, by the way, go to the show notes. We're going to put a link in there that you can buy the book, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, straight from our podcast show notes. But our brand is not the hero.
We're not. And we've tried to convey that over and over when we're talking to people. We want to be experts. We want to be liked and trusted. And so we end up trying to make our brand, our company, the hero in the story, and they get squeezed out. You know, the old saying, if you push too much information in, you squeeze your audience out. And that's what happens sometimes. When I sit down at the place to get my oil change, I don't need to know about the flux capacitor. Like, I really don't care. Is it going to get me better gas mileage? Is it going to make my tires last longer, my engine run longer? That's all I need to know. Don't give me all the details. Get very simple. How is it that I'm going to be able to get more out of your company?
Well, at the end of the day, each one of us is trying to learn to hone our message, to bring people into what we already know is excellent. And today, you're going to get those secrets. You're going to be able to follow, again, how we've done our podcast, and hopefully it will benefit your business. Let's go ahead and just jump straight in and interview JJ.
Welcome in the show, JJ. We're so excited to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, big fans. We've been following your podcast for a year, almost two now, and most of our podcast listeners will start to recognize that we're not really that big of geniuses in the way that we create this, since we've really stolen everything from the Superman podcast.
I think, was it Picasso that said good artists create and great artists steal or something like that? I don't know. It wasn't him. I'm sure we've all just attributed it to him, but yeah. We steal a lot ourselves. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We call it R&D,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rip off and duplicate.
I call it an homage. An homage. It's honoring what has come before and building upon it. So yeah.
There you go. Well, it's funny because there's no real original information out there. It's all been reused somehow, some way. And as soon as I think that I have created something that nobody else has, I realize all around me it already existed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And today, really, the purpose of this podcast is to kind of help our listener who is a business owner who is struggling with the same sort of ways to connect with their end user. How do I take my message and have it clarified? And we know very simply, because in our business, it's really hard to clarify what we do sometimes.
Yeah.
And that is what StoryBrand's about. Am I right in that?
Yeah, completely. That's when I first came to StoryBrand. So I've been with StoryBrand for about 3 years, and we help people clarify their messaging, both their marketing, their email campaigns, their one-liners, taglines, all that stuff. We kind of go in and work with businesses, or they come to us to these workshops, typically in Nashville, and we help them just work through their messaging through a story framework. And when I first came about 3 years ago, I was actually living in LA, and I was in the midst of pitching a reality television show, because that's what you do when you live in LA. Right. and I had met Don, the founder, Donald Miller, and he invited me to come and just clarify my message about my pitch for the television show. And my background is I have 2 degrees in communication and 1 degree in theology and the arts, so study of story and film and television. And then I'd been working in nonprofit, like fundraising and public relations and teaching as a professor, taught communications for basically all of that over the last 20 years, doing communication. And I came to the workshop, and I actually went through the process, and I was pissed because, it was one of those things where I'm like, what you said, none of the individual pieces of was new information to me. It's stuff that when I was doing things well, I had been doing it intuitively already. But he put it in such a simple and clear framework that I was so angry I didn't develop it myself. I was just like, are you kidding me? This is so easy. And so what we do then is basically take people through that process to help them clarify their message, so that when you're getting ready to write emails for an email campaign, when you're putting up a website, when you're just sitting down with somebody face to face, you have a formula, essentially a clear formula that's based on a couple thousand years of storytelling formula. It's been perfected over the years. And it's also based on kind of some brain science of helping things be really clear and compelling. Because I think a lot of businesses, they have great products, they have great people, and they're doing this amazing thing, and they just can't figure out how to quickly tell somebody what it is that they do in a way that makes people want to buy.
Yeah, well, when I think the first way it was introduced to me, and this was years ago, probably two and a half years ago, somewhere in that range, I was at a mastermind event, and someone was talking about this StoryBrand and how they used it. And I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but one of the things that resonated with me when the person was talking to our group about it, she had gone through the StoryBranding, I guess, workshop. She said, we have a curse of knowledge.
Yep.
And she talked about the fact that, as experts, technicians, we tend to talk in 9s and 10s instead of 2s and 3s to our end user. And I resonated with that so much.
Yeah, and I think the other thing in that is that, especially for people who are starting out, or they're solo entrepreneurs or business owners, I've been in that kind of position, and there's almost like an insecurity that you have to sell yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You have to sell your authority. You have to sell that you're the best product out there, the best service out there. And so when you do that, you start putting in more and more information. And what we think that's doing by putting in more information and getting into the details is we're adding more value. We're showing the value of our business and service. And instead, what we're actually doing is confusing people. And
wow.
there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it, even just from a brain's kind of science side of things. But in the most simple terms, and we talk about this in our workshop and in the book, Building a Story Brand, that our brains are designed to help us survive and thrive, right? That's really what our brains are designed to do. And one of the ways that it does that is by conserving calories. Anytime you enter into a decision-making process, it causes you to have to burn calories in order to make decisions. Anytime you're trying to get information and boil it down, you have to burn calories. And our brains are designed to basically stop thinking to get to the most simple version of the information that applies to how we survive and thrive. So kind of for instance is when you walk into Starbucks, you don't pick up a package of coffee and look at all of everything that goes into that package. Like, oh, look at this material. Look at how it feels. Look at this font they're using. They use these 5 words. Oh, there's 5 A's in this sentence. There's 2 T's. We don't go through all that information. There's so much there. Our brain filters all of that extra stuff out immediately and just goes, coffee, good. It's kind of that caveman mentality of like, need coffee now. And we're not really going into everything. We don't think about all the stuff that goes into making the coffee. We just go into the coffee. And if we did that with all the information that's bombarded at us every day, we wouldn't function. We literally wouldn't survive. And we would burn so many calories that when it came to important decisions, like how do I defend myself in a fight or how do I find food, we wouldn't actually be able to keep thinking because we've burned all the calories on basic information like colors and fonts and feel and all this stuff. So our brain does that already. So what happens is when people start to explain what they do from a business perspective, and they're adding all these details in, and they're talking about how when they were founded and what struggles they went through to build their business and all the intricacies of the product or service itself, people are automatically starting to filter all of that information out and trying to their brains are shutting down. They're looking for what is it that helps me survive and thrive. And so what story does is it brings meaning and really a path let me see, how do I say this? Basically, story shows us what to focus on and what is important in the information we need to see, and how that applies to us specifically. And it allows us to basically enter into a quick understanding of how does this product or how does this service or how does this business help me survive or thrive without having to filter out all the other information that causes our brain to turn off when we go too big.
Let me ask you this, JJ. So you guys do tons of these workshops and we've heard you on the podcast. What would you say is the number one thing that business owners are getting wrong in the story of their business?
They're making the story about themselves.
Ooh.
That, I would say that's the biggest thing, is that story is such a huge... It's such a big word right now in marketing and branding. Everybody's like, you've got to tell a good story. It's got to be about story. But nobody actually knows how to tell a good story. They just know they need to tell a story. And so they try to tell the story about themselves.
Yeah.
Well, if you're telling the story about yourself and how great you are, I'm sitting there going, but wait, how does this help me survive and thrive?
Yeah, what's in it for me in that?
Exactly. And so I start tuning you out immediately. I don't care how good your story is. I'm the hero of my story, and I want to know how you relate to me.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point right here, is to jump into how do you actually build a good story, right? I mean, you guys have a wonderful tool that Joey and I are using at this very moment, and we've used every podcast, every webinar that we do. Even in a lot of times when we're building out different, how we're going to create something for the future, we're using this. It's helped us. And as you said, having a simple process as an entrepreneur who's very scatterbrained, This makes it so much more simple. So I don't have to use all that mental energy that you talked about earlier. My brain doesn't shut down. So help us build out story. What does that framework look like?
Yeah. So if you were writing a screenplay or, a novel, there's actually many more points to a story that you have to hit. But for the purpose of branding and kind of breaking all stories down to a really simple formula, there's really, basically, we call it the 7-part framework. So there's 7 parts to every story that you've ever heard. And it starts with the character. And the character is the hero of the story. And within the first probably 10 minutes of any movie, you need to know what it is that character wants. What does the character want? Who do they want to become? Right? That's kind of what's the identity they're longing for. Are they wanting to be more brave? Are they wanting to be strong? Are they wanting to be a champion? We know that instinctively by watching the movie. And if the movie gets that wrong in the first 10 minutes, if that's not clear, or they want 50 things, if Matt Damon in Bourne Identity wants to not just find out what his identity is, but he wants to, or where he comes from, but he wants to open a bakery, and he wants to run a marathon, and he wants to fall in love with a girl, and he wants to adopt a cat, we're lost. It's done.
Right.
And so you have to very clearly define in the very beginning of a story what it is that a character wants and who they want to become.
Which JJ, let me jump in. So that's what our client or our customer, where that fits into the story, correct?
Yes. So your customer is the hero of the story. And so they're looking for something. So it's their movie and they're looking for something. And so the first thing you need to do in branding is identify what is it that your character wants. And that actually is even so for some businesses, that's really hard because their customers want 50 different things. They want to be more efficient with their time. They need good consulting. They need a coach. They want to buy some shoes that do this, or, they want 50 different things. But when it comes to marketing and branding in any good movie, you need to quickly be able to identify what it is that the customer wants and be able to articulate that so that they identify. And that's one thing that, like, with websites in particular, we work with a lot of companies and we go to their websites, and on their website is a picture of a mountain and a compass, and it says, "Find your purpose." And they're a consulting company. Well, you need to tell me, so that kind of gives me a hint that, maybe you can help me find my purpose, but you don't tell me within that first 3 seconds of me coming on your website that you are a consulting company. And if I'm looking for a consulting company and I have to dig on your website for consulting to figure out that you do consulting, then you're causing me to burn too many calories. So the first thing in the story brand framework is character, understanding who your character is, which is your customer, and identifying what is it that they want and articulating that very clearly.
Well, I know when Joey and I we went through a story brand certified person, I forget whatever the proper
consultant
title,
or whatever.
Consultant. Guide. And they broke it down our stuff and they said, okay, help us understand what is it that your character wants. I was like, well, how much time do you have? Right? Because it is like we're just starting to unload all of these different things. And what we found out is that we really didn't quite understand what they wanted because we were trying to solve for every need that there was.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they want to have more of the money that they make.
Yep.
We want to keep more. It took us a long time to narrow it down to that single item. But it is really hard sometimes as a business owner to know, what is that one thing?
Yeah, the reason why we like a lot of these movies is they've been through editing for 2 years, right? They had all this other information, and even books and good novels. They've been through so much editing that just crosses things out, gets rid of a bunch of junk. But you have to be really known for one thing. And the way that you identify that is by saying, what is it that the customer wants, the hero wants, in relationship to your brand? Now, they may want a better marriage and a peace of mind and all this stuff. They want to raise their kids great. great. But if you're selling shoes, you're probably not going to help them on that story, right? Somebody else can help them with that story.
Right. I don't know about that. I believe that good shoes are key to having good marriages. So
preach.
Oh my goodness.
Preach.
Now, there is a problem though, right? So that we know what they want, but there's lots of things keeping them from getting there. That's kind of the second part of the framework.
So this is where probably the most powerful piece, I would say. There's two. The next two are really the most powerful, I would say, in the whole framework. Is that any good movie, the character has to have a problem that they encounter that gets in the way of that. If there's no problem, then there's no story. And so, like, if Liam Neeson's daughter gets kidnapped once again, and he gets a phone call that says, hey, I have your daughter. And then 2 minutes into the movie later, he gets another phone call that says, hey, it was a prank by her friends, and they're actually in London, and they just want you to come over and go shopping and talk about colleges. Then that's a horrible movie, right? There has to be, any good story has to be about a problem, overcoming a problem. So the first thing is understanding what the character wants, and the second thing is the problem. And the key to this is you have to talk about your customers' problems. You have to identify what is the problem that's getting in the way of what they want, and then you have to talk about it over and over and over again. People identify brands with the problems they solve, not the products they sell.
Oh, you need somebody write that down right now. Write it down. That's gold right there.
Huge. And I think that's another, I mean, you asked earlier, what's the biggest mistake people make? I'll probably go, this is the biggest mistake people make. No, the thing is, if you just think about it very simply, if I have a headache and you're like, I'm talking to you and I'm like, man, I have a headache. What would you offer me as a solution to that?
Yeah, Tylenol.
You guys, Tylenol, right?
Yeah.
If I then say to you, I ate some bad fish last night, my stomach's not feeling really well, what would you offer me as a solution?
Some Pepto,
right? Well, we only think of those brands in terms of the problems they solve. We don't think of Pepto outside of my stomach. We don't think of Advil or Tylenol outside of solving the pain, the headache. So when you talk about your customers' problems, you are positioning yourself as the Tylenol to their headache. And you have to talk about that. So you're not being manipulative or going over the top or like being fear driven. But if you just start off by saying something along the lines of, hey, we know that ultimately when it comes down to your business, you want more money in your pocket that's going out. The problem is,
yes.
And you have to identify what is the primary problem that your brand solves that gets in the way of them doing that. And that is what enters into the real part of the story. And we talk about this in our workshops, but there's 3 levels of problems. There's the external problem, internal problem, and philosophical. And I'll just hit on the internal just for a second here, because this is another key. A lot of people sell products to fix external problems, but people buy products to solve internal.
Yeah.
If my lawn is overgrown, but I don't feel embarrassed or overwhelmed by that, I'm not hiring anybody to fix it.
Yes.
True statement.
There has to be that internal conflict of I feel embarrassed or I'm overwhelmed or I'm frustrated. That is why I actually buy the product. So when you're talking about the levels of problem, the different problems your customer have, you not only have to identify and speak to the external, but also talk about what internal problem is created by that external. Your lawn is overgrown, so you feel frustrated. And then you just speak to the idea of stop feeling frustrated, stop feeling overwhelmed. But a lot of us in branding just stop at that first thing of like, hey, we can fix your lawn. Or for you guys, we can get more money. We can help you to get more money in your pocket. Well, that's an external problem.
Right.
What's the internal problem that they're feeling based on the fact that they're experiencing that?
Yeah, well, so what, right? I mean, at the end of the day, all of these benefits is what's the so what, and that's what that internal problem is talking about. So exactly. I come home, my yard looks bad, and I'm like, I want somebody to cut it so it looks better, and I don't have to do it.
Yeah. and so, well, even I would even argue with that is look better is external, and you don't have to do it is also external. When you experience those things, I have to do it and looks bad. How does that make you feel?
Look at him. This is the
Schooling.
master taking me.
So that I'll just ask you that question. Let's say you come home, you see your lawn, and you go, "Man, I don't have the time or energy to do that." How does that make you feel internally?
It makes me feel like I'm overworked. It makes me feel like, I'm probably a bad homeowner if I come home and there's weeds and there's all this trash out in the yard and I'm not taking care of it. Then, I need help with that. That's not okay with me being an extrovert, someone who cares about what people think. That's going to eat me up inside.
So right there, if I'm a lawn person and I'm trying to sell to your internal problems, I'm going to say something along the lines of feel proud of your home, enjoy having people come over to your house, right? Like build the community that you want. All of those kind of things sell to the internal problem compared to the external.
One of our clients actually has a lawn like fertilizer company, and his truck, I always get a kick out of this. It says, "Want your weekends back?"
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about, "Hey, let me fertilize your lawn." He's like, "Want your weekends back?"
Exactly.
And that's huge. That's huge.
And that's dealing with internal of like, am I a good dad? Can I, I'm wasting my time on my lawn when I should be with my kids.
We've heard the Robert Kiyosaki's of the world saying, how much do you make an hour? Why are you out there cutting the grass? Why are you out there, doing these things that someone else can do and do better than you can? But really what they're doing is they're pointing to the internal is like, what is it that you could be doing? So if you have free time, why wouldn't you be spending that free time with family? Why wouldn't you be spending that time in a hobby that you love? Now, if sometimes the release though is for, that's not where we're going, is in those areas. But for me, I got plenty of other places I can get a release. It's not pushing the lawnmower.
Yeah. So that's really those things once you identify what it is the character wants and then what problems get in the way of them getting that, both external and internal, and then philosophical is a little bit more complex. I won't go into that right now. But then what you do as a business, this is now finally when you get to come and talk about you.
Finally.
I know you've been waiting the whole time. So now what you do is you come into the story and you position yourself as a guide.
Yes.
That's when I would say that's the biggest thing when I said at the beginning of what's the mistake people make is they start the story with their business. You start the story with the character and the character is not you. You are the guide. So in any good movie, Luke Skywalker has Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi. Katniss in Hunger Games has Woody from Cheers. There's like all of these, you'll notice in all these movies, there's a guide in the story that comes alongside and helps the character achieve what they want. Because we know intuitively they can't achieve it on their own. Otherwise, they would have just done it.
Yes.
So in good movies, there's a guide who comes in. You position yourself as the guide, the person who helps them overcome the problems. And you have to, in order to do that, talk about how you've been there and done that for other people and you care about them. We call it empathy and authority. So you have to give empathy and authority, speak empathy and authority to where your character, your customer knows you understand their problems, but you've also fixed it for other people. And so you just do that and you do it very lightly. This is the mistake a lot of people make is they talk about that a lot. This is all the things I've done. These are amazing things. I've been around for that. No, you just need to sprinkle a little bit of seasoning into the story with the guide. The guide's not the main character. It's the hero.
Well, that's a good point. And I tell you now that I watch movies and I'm constantly trying to figure out who's the guide in the movie.
Yeah.
And that's hard sometimes. Like in Happy Gilmore, is it Chubbs or is it the girlfriend? Like which one was the one who helped Happy?
Sometimes you can have on a longer journey in a movie, you can have multiple guides. That's not the cleanest story. The cleanest story has one, but most have some form of multiple guides in it. And here's the trick, and we talk about this in our workshop a lot. Here's the trick how you can tell who's the guide in the story and who is not, who's the hero, is the guide doesn't change. The hero is on the journey of transformation.
Gotcha.
So even you can have movies about a guide. So if you think about in Mary Poppins, if based on the definition I just gave you, who is the hero and who is the guide?
So the guide is going to be Mary Poppins. She doesn't change, and the hero would be the dad.
Yeah. So the story is really about the dad.
Yeah.
And his transformation. And so that's what, like, a lot of people are like, oh, if the story isn't about me, if it's about the hero, then why can I ever talk about myself? Or say you're an individual solo entrepreneur and your brand is built around your name and your personality. Oh, I can never put my picture on a website or anything. No, that's not true. You just have to understand, even when, like, do you guys know Dave Ramsey?
Yeah.
So, the company is named after him. He's everywhere, right? But he always plays the guide in the story. He is never the hero. And like with Mary Poppins, you don't know her backstory. You don't know where she came from. You don't know if she had kids or not. You don't know her training. All you know
came from the clouds, I thought. Wasn't it the clouds?
Yes, he did. Yeah, exactly.
I seem to remember clouds.
Clouds are in there for sure, but you don't know much about her. You only know that she is there for the family. So that's the same thing with the business. When you're talking about yourself as a guide, they don't really need to know a lot about you and a lot about your past other than how it relates to their story. So
that's tough though, especially in what we do. Like our business is built on trust. And so it's like, well, how can I, do business with you, JJ, if you don't know and trust me? So I need to tell you about me. I need to give you all of this information about me. But at the end of the day, you're so right that people don't care about you. They only care about what you're doing and how it will affect them.
Yep. And that all goes back to the problems. Yeah. So you have to say, I understand the problems, and you have to give some evidence of that you understand. Maybe you went through it yourself. You experienced what they were experiencing. That's the most empathetic perspective, is we get it because we were there. But other is like, hey, another way of expressing empathy is just so many of our clients experience this and we feel that pain with them. Even that's just empathy. And then authority is, but we've helped thousands of people this, or we've helped, people achieve this. You can also do that through testimony, where other people talk about you and you don't have to talk about yourself.
No, that's great. Well, now the next part of this framework is getting into the plan. And this is the part that is also difficult, because sometimes, like in what we do, there's probably 20 to 30 things someone could do from start to finish.
Yes.
But you can't do all of that, right?
Not in the initial discussion. In the initial, when you're meeting people, when you're doing the pitch, when you've got a website, you've got to break those 30 things down to 3 steps. People need to be able to see very quickly, I can do this. You have a plan for me. As a guide, you say, I have a plan for you. I have a way forward. If you think about any like heist movie, there's literally a scene that happens where they go, here's the plan. Well, the reason they do that is because no matter, like in Ocean's 11, no matter how fanciful the idea is of, robbing the Bellagio, right, we need to be able to see as an audience that they can do it. There is a way forward. And so it's the same with your customers. You need to be able to show them it's this easy for you to do it. All you do is 1, 2, 3. So you break down all 30 of the steps that you have into 3 categories, or 3. Right. Sometimes it's just benefits of these are the 3 things you get, or the 3 ways that we do business. We help you through this. But it's all about showing them a path forward. And what that does is it overcomes any kind of objection that they have that this is going to be hard or difficult or confusing. And you're making it very, very simple. So you understand, going back, because I always go back to the beginning of walking through, understanding how the story all works together. The character, you have to identify who the character is and what they want, the problems that then get in the way of them getting what they want, how you then come in as the guide who helps them to overcome the problem with a clear and simple plan forward. That builds trust in them with you as their guide. And then one big key thing next is that you have to call them to action. That's the next step, is that if you don't call them to action, people do not act on their own. They, in any good movie, like if somebody, again, like if I'm 30 pounds overweight and it doesn't really bother me, the way that all of a sudden I will move to action in a movie is if I run into an ex-girlfriend at a grocery store who is now a yoga instructor, and our high school reunion is in a month. Now there's a moment that I have to act. You know, there's something I move to action, and people don't act on their own. We think like, oh, they'll just call us. And so we have to give a clear, strong call to action. On a website, this is usually just the buy now button or schedule a call. You need to give them some kind of climactic scene that makes them move forward on the plan to get to where they want to be.
And this is a big miss for businesses. I mean, you can go on 90% of the websites out there, and that first, whatever they call it, above the fold, when you click on it, most businesses don't tell you, how do I just go ahead and buy? Or how do I schedule with you? How do I do whatever it is? I have to start scrolling, or I have to start clicking around. Yeah. And for somebody like me that wants things now, that's a big issue, right?
Well, and think also about this, Russ. I mean, we've even been challenged about this in the past. Like, well, if I'm done a good job, won't they just call me? Right, leaving it into this kind of a passive, response that we're expecting someone else to take action instead of giving them a clear path and giving them a call to action, like you're saying.
Yeah, I used to work with college students. I was dean of students at a college, and these guys would come up to me and ask me for like dating advice. And they're like, well, we've been studying together like every night this week. And we hung out with like all of our friends. I eat lunch every day with her. And I'm like, have you asked her out yet? Well, no. That's not a way to make babies. I mean, you just gotta after marriage. Okay. Yeah. Yes. But it's like, it's a sense of like, no, if you want to, do you like her? Do you want to move forward? Then ask her out. Her out. And one of the things that, what you're saying is we just think if we build it, they will come. If we make it pretty enough, if we make it appealing enough. No, you have to call them to action. And when you don't, what you're actually doing is kind of what those guys are doing. You're not communicating clearly that you are confident enough to move forward in a relationship. We think we're being kind by not asking for the sale, right? We don't want to be pushy. We don't want to be those guys at midnight with the chainsaw sawing mattresses in half. We don't want to come across as those people. And so we just kind of like passively, but what that actually says is we're weak. We don't actually believe what we have to offer will solve your problems.
Yeah, if you've got the answer to cancer, why would you not give it to somebody? Like, well, they didn't ask me for it, so I'll just let them die.
Yep. Yeah, right? You have to do it, and you have to go strong. And it doesn't always have to be like if you don't have, if on your website they can't buy now. Like we always say the call to action should be your buy now button. Well, you may not have a product they can buy from your website, but what is the next step you want them to take? And not a passive step like learn more. Learn more is not a good call to action. It's schedule a call. It's visit a store. It's something. What is that thing? Visit a location. Buy now. Go to the shop now. Something like that. Give us that strong call to action.
Yeah, it's sign up for the next webinar that we're doing.
Exactly. Yes.
Exactly. Or come to the next workshop that you're doing, right? Anybody in the Seattle area, JJ's got a workshop coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. And then once you do that, once you call them to action, then the last thing is you have to show them their stakes in the story. And the stakes in the story are that this story can go incredibly well with success, or they're going to continue struggling with the things they've been struggling with, which is failure. And so you have to show them what life looks like on the other side of that call to action, whether they accepted or rejected the call to action. If they accepted the call to action, then life is great. And we need to talk about that. So after they've bought your product or service, what does life look like? Pitch, just throw out a bunch of things that they save time. They get to have a better retirement. They're not stressed out about things. Talk about that. Give them a picture. Give them an aspirational goal. And you also have to talk about the failure the pain they're going to continue experiencing if they don't act. Now, this is where you can get a little manipulative if you go really big on this. But
Right.
you don't want to. This is another one of those, like, just sprinkle a little seasoning in the recipe of the story. But they need to know there's something at stake or they're not going to act. But like, those Sarah McLachlan commercials with the dog, and the arms of angels, right? Like, now when that comes on TV, everybody turns it off. Like, you turn the channel immediately because they've just gone way too heavy with the failure. You don't want to be that.
It's a little heavy-handed.
A little heavy-handed, but just sprinkle in a little bit and then turn right around and just show the aspirational success of what life can be like. They're going to save time. They're going to be more happy. They're going to have more free time. They're going to get their weekends back. Weekends back is success in the story, right? He's not in that on his truck. He's not living in like, well, I'm going to go through this and this is how I'm going to fertilize. He's just going, get your weekends back. And if you're going to overdo anything in the story, and by overdo, I mean like highlight it the most, it's the success. Yes. You want to do lots and lots of success. You don't want to overpromise, but you don't want to, but you have to show success. So on your website, the images on your website should be images of success. Happy, smiley people experiencing your product in a way that is their life is better. And so just kind of going through the whole thing now of the story is understanding who the character is and what they want, understanding then what the problems are that are getting in the way of that, positioning yourself as the guide to overcome their problems with your product or service because you have a plan that moves them forward, and you keep it very simple, typically 3-step plan that calls them to action. And we then know that the results are either success or failure. And once you identify that basically messaging, that simple story, and really in all of those spaces, it should be no more than one sentence. Once you're kind of really identifying all of these thoughts, one, maybe really one sentence, keep it clear and concise. Once you do that, then that becomes the foundation for all of your messaging moving forward. You can take pieces of that and put it on your website in different places. You might have success above the fold with a call to action and what the character wants. Then down below the fold, you have the plan. Then a little bit lower, you might have some authority and testimonies, something like that. But that's not formulaic. You can kind of play with it. It becomes a little bit more of an art of writing the story. Then on your emails, you can start out the whole email by saying something like, hey, I'll give you an example. Here at StoryBrand, we know that you want to have a clear message. The problem is most people are so close to their product that they don't understand. They're not able to communicate clearly what it is that they do, which makes them feel frustrated because they're losing out in the marketplace to people who with inferior products. We understand at StoryBrand because we experienced this exact same thing when we started, but developed a program and a formula that has helped thousands of people triple and quadruple their revenue. Here's how we do it. We teach you how story works. Then after we teach you how story works and why it's important, we help you develop your story brand script. We call it a brand script. Excuse me. We help you develop a brand script that keeps all of your messaging very simple. Then third, what we do is we show you how to apply that to your marketing. So in order to develop your brand script and clarify your message, all you need to do is come to one of our live workshops in Nashville. And when you do, you're going to stop feeling frustrated and overwhelmed and putting an unclear messaging out there that loses you business. And instead, you're going to grow your company. You're going to be able to write emails easier, and you're going to be able to have way more free time to spend with your family.
Ah, so good. This has been one of our best podcasts. I'm so excited that we were able to get you on, especially since we have been using this brand scripting model. So a couple call to actions for our clients who are listening to this. So clearly we got a date you and we have a chance to get married, right?
Yeah. We call it the transitional call to action and direct call to action.
So give our audience one thing. If they're like, this sounds really good, I want to find out more. What is it that you would have them do? I mean, I would tell them to go to your podcast, start listening. That's a must, or buy the book StoryBrand. But there's probably something else that you would tell them.
Why don't you let JJ tell them what to do? It's kind of
But
important.
I know that he's the hero. I'm trying to play God here.
You're trying to play the guide. I get it. One of the easiest ways just to get some simple and quick tips that can immediately start impacting your business is at our website. One of the easiest ways to get some quick tips that will kind of start making some immediate impact on your website and in your marketing would be to go to our website, 5minutemarketingmakeover.com. And you can spell the 5 out or use the number, but 5minutemarketingmakeover.com. And you're going to get some videos that just kind of use some of these principles that you can start applying now to your business and marketing that will help you grow. Then we also do workshops where we spend a day, well, really 2 days with companies walking through this whole process, giving feedback. We have coaches in the room that kind of help you. And we do those in Nashville about every other month. And then we also do private workshops where we come to you. And you can find those at storybrand.com. So I would say those are the two things. If you're ready to jump into a workshop, come on down because we have a lot of fun at them.
No, well, I will totally encourage you to take them up on this offer. Joey and I have gone through this process. We hired a certified StoryBrand guide to kind of help us go through that. We did a 2-day more private thing, but I've actually been looking at coming to Nashville to get the full-on experience and also get a chance, hopefully, to meet you guys. So this is something that you need to take advantage of. Your business needs it. Your consumer needs to know what you really do for them and that they are ultimately the hero in your story. So thank you so much, JJ, for coming on and sharing all these great nuggets with us.
Oh, thank you guys. And thanks for what you do for same with you. What we really believe in giving. With messaging, we talk about kind of giving the good people the microphone. We want to make sure that the people who are out there kind of hustling and working hard get a clear message and actually succeed. And just kind of knowing a little bit about what you guys do. You guys are acting as the guides to your customers as well, helping them live the lives they want to live through their businesses and through their investments. And so we're all about kind of supporting you guys as well. So,
all right. Well, thank you so much. We enjoyed it.
Thank you guys.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.